Hello, welcome to another edition of Cracking the Cryptic. Today I wanted to take a look at another of these unusual endgames that you can come up against in some of the very hardest classic Sudoku puzzles, so Sudokus with normal rules. Now this puzzle appeared in the recent US qualifier for the World Puzzle Championship, and it was the hardest rated classic Sudoku that appeared in the exam. And I solved it and I reached this point without too much difficulty. It wasn't absolutely straightforward, but it was. This is where I got to, and there are a couple of things I wanted to talk about. The first thing is a uniqueness point. So if we look at the relationship of the 5s and the 8s here in columns 5 and column 6, and look at this square in particular, where all of the candidates are listed, all of the sort of simple choices are listed here, 1, 4, 5 and 8 all still possible. And ask ourselves the question, is it possible that this square could contain a choice of a 5 or an 8, so this sort of thing? It should be pretty clear that that is not possible, because if this square could be a 5 or an 8, there would be two solutions to the puzzle. Whichever way we arrange the 5s and the 8s in these 4 squares here, this one, this one, this one and this one, we can simply swap the 5s to an 8 and the 8s to the 5s, and we'll have another solution. Now this is a good puzzle, and therefore it will have only one solution, so we can use a little bit of a trick on this cell to eliminate the 5 and the 8 as possibilities. That's not going to take you far enough. So the next thing I thought it might be interesting to look at is the relationship between the 4 cells that are highlighted on the screen now, and ask ourselves whether we can deduce anything further by thinking hard about these 4 cells. And interestingly enough, we can. The way we need to think about this is by noticing that this square contains a 5 or an 8. And it should be clear, therefore, that if we look at the candidates for these 2 squares, it's not valid that this is an 8 and this is a 5, for example. We can't fill these 2 squares with a 5 and an 8, because if these 2 squares contain a 5 and an 8, there'll be nothing left to put in this square. So the maximum numbers of 5s and 8s that can appear in these 2 cells is one of them. You could have one of them as an absolute maximum. Now, if that's the case, at least one of these 2 cells will be a 1 or a 2. Now, how does that help? Well, it interacts rather cleverly with this cell here, which is also a 1 or a 2. Now we know one of these 2 cells is a 1 or a 2, and therefore the other, whichever one we didn't use, will be this cell. Therefore, there can't be any other 1s and 2s in this column. It is impossible. So looking at this cell here and this cell here, for example, we're able to remove this 2 candidate and this 1 candidate by this logic. And we end up with this position. Unfortunately, that's still, I think, not enough to crack this puzzle. And in fact, having stared at this for quite a while, I noticed that we can use another of these sort of chains of pairs that we looked at in an earlier Sudoku video to eliminate another candidate here, which I think then takes us to the solution. But it's not easy to see, as I say, if you don't allow yourself to guess and try and work it through. There's an interaction, so I'm going to highlight a number of cells on the screen now. This is which allows us to deduce something about another cell. So try and think about the cells that I've highlighted and see if you can spot which number they allow us to eliminate. So the answer is that they eliminate something in this square here, and in fact it's the 5. And let me explain why. Because, well, one choice for this square would be a 5, which would obviously eliminate this 5 very quickly. But let's ask ourselves what happens if this is instead a 6. Now watch what happens if this is a 6. If this is a 6, this is a 9, and this is a 2. and this is an 8, and this is a 7, and this is a 5. So either way, whether this is a 5 or a 6, this 5 here is not possible, because it will either be eliminated by there being a 5 here, or it will be eliminated by there being a 5 here. So we can eliminate this 5, and that brings us to this position. And then we can use a similar technique, but it's a little bit simpler to spot, with the 3 digits, or the 3 cells that I've highlighted now on the screen. So again, I'd encourage you to see if you can spot which number it is that I'm allowed to eliminate by thinking just about these 3 cells. And the answer this time is this cell. We can now eliminate a number from this cell. And using exactly the same logic, if this cell is an 8, obviously this cell is a 7. However, if this cell is a 1, it has an effect on this cell. It forces this cell to be a 2, which forces this cell to be an 8, which again would allow us to eliminate the 8 from this position. So whichever way round we go, we can eliminate 8 as a candidate in this cell. And once we've done that, obviously it has to be a 7, this has to be a 5, and this has to be a 1, 2, 8, and the puzzle collapses from here. But what an interesting sort of end game. There's sort of 3 or 4 extremely difficult steps to actually crack this. Definitely an example of a puzzle where guessing would be much quicker, but satisfying anyway to spend a bit of time on it and find some of the hidden workings. So I hope that was interesting, and we'll see you again for another edition of Cracking the Cryptic very soon. If you like the channel, please do subscribe and like the video. Comments welcome. Thank you very much for watching.